Hey, horror fans, once again, it is me, the Horror Miser Monty G, trying to review the latest psychological religious horror film. This one is called Heretic. How strong is your faith? Ha 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 ha.
Y'all ready for this?
Once again, it is me, the Horror Miser Monty. Now, Heretic is a 2024 American psychological horror film. It was written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. Now, the film stars Hugh Grant, Sylvie Thatcher, Chloe Ace, and Troper Grace. Now, in this film, two young religious women are drawn into a cat and mouse game in a house of a strange man. Ooh. So, horror fans, so far this year, we've had several horror films that were based in religion, or religion was the focus of that particular film. Earlier this year, in both The First Omen and Immaculate, featured nuns being used by the church to either push their faith onto their people or to cause fear to build people's faith back in the church. Because if you've seen those two films, you know what the aspects are, the premise are those films, because they're both similar. The First Omen tried to use fear in order to get people back into the church, while Immaculate tried to push the narrative because of what happened at the film, which I won't explain, to actually, bring people's faith back into the church. Now, of course, we have other religious horror films such as The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Frailty that actually shows the psychological side of dealing with possession and exorcism, unlike the films such as The Exorcist and The Pope's Exorcist does, because both those films, yes, they do talk about religion, but on the more psychological side, especially when it comes to The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Frailty, they don't have people with their heads turning around or speaking in tongues or using those demonic voices as we see in The Exorcist and The Pope's Exorcist. So we see that there are plenty of premises that a horror filmmaker can make when using religion as the focal point of the film. So that brings us to American filmmakers Scott Beck and Brian Wood's latest project into this subgenre of horror, the psychological horror film called Heretic. And no, I'm not talking about Exorcist 2. We could forget about that film. Now here we have two young missionaries, Sister Barnes and Sister Praxton, trying to spread the good work and convert people into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormons. Now their travels take them to a lovely home of a nice and charming Englishman named Mr. Reed. Not all seems nice and wonderful at first. They have some nice conversations with Mr. Reed regarding their religion. But then after some weird questions regarding their faith, Barnes and Paxton begin to realize that Mr. Reed is not the nice and charming man who he appears to be. Uh-oh. And so begins the cat and mouse game that Barnes and Paxton must play if they have any chance of surviving this nightmare that they find themselves in. He must give Beck and Woods credit for coming with a unique premise when it comes to religion and testing one's faith in that religion, because this is something quite different than we've seen in other films. And it actually should be no surprise. This is coming from the same writing duo that gave us A Quiet Place, one of my favorite horror films of all times, and Haunt, which I thought was a very unique horror film during the Halloween season. Really enjoyed Haunt, and of course, really love A Quiet Place. Now, instead of using the same cliche premise that we've seen in films of a similar premise, Beck and Woods use a different style when it comes to Mr. Reed, because he's the main focal point of the film, but how he does it is quite different and something I haven't seen when it comes to religious horror films like this one. Now, it's an unusual but an effective way of how Mr. Reed tests Barnes and Paxton in their beliefs in their religion. Now, we get to see that during the first act of the film, where Mr. Reed asks Barnes and Paxton an unusual question regarding parts of the Mormon faith. I thought it was a very effective way to talk about the Mormon faith. And a lot of people might not know what the typical background was of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Faith that was actually discovered by John Smith. If I got that guy right, name right. If I didn't, just let me know. And I like that aspect because the guy really goes into in depth of the background of the Mormon faith. And I really thought Hugh Grant did an excellent job. We'll talk about his performance later. Now, both Beck and Woods do a decent job of how the film flows. There's great pacing in the film, as when the girls realize the danger that they're in, they find themselves in, they up the stakes by the time the second act begins. Now, this creates the right amount of tension and the suspense that you need for a film like this, and the back and forth that the girls have with Mr. Reed keeps the audience on their toes, as you don't know what to expect, what's going to happen to Barnes and Paxton. I thought that was a great aspect of the film, especially during the second act of the film. We don't know what to expect, and I really thought that was a decent way of how they play, how those scenes are played. Now, I really have to give Hugh Grant credit because he does an outstanding job at playing Mr. Grant. Now, he plays Mr. Grant as a charming, highly intelligent Englishman who seems innocent and nice at first, but as the film goes on, he becomes a man who's a gifted manipulator and seems obsessed on people's faith in their religion. I mean, he goes to great lengths with Barnes and Paxton. While it may seem extreme and weird, Mr. Reed's style might make sense to some people, and what he say might be true. There is a little nice soliloquy that he goes on during the second act of the film when he talks about religion and the three main religions in the film and some of the history that he goes into. And some of that kind of makes sense. I won't reveal what it is, but if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. No, I really don't believe any other actor could have pulled off what Hugh Grant does with Mr. Reed, which is very good since I've only known Hugh Grant back during his rom-com days. I really never seen him play the role of a villain before. Now, I believe he plays a sort of a bad guy in that Dungeons and Dragons film that came out, I think came out a couple years ago. It might have been last year, because I remember seeing it on the cruise Kelly and I went on before, but mine came early this year before. I also understand he did a role with Nicole Kidman in The Undoing, which was an HBO miniseries, but I never saw that before. But I really got to give Hugh Grant credit because I think this is the best acting job he's seen. But like I said, I don't watch rom-com films. I didn't see any of those earlier films he did in his career. You know, before the little bad thing he did that kind of ruined his career. I think it happened during I think it was in the early 2000s. I forget when that incident took place. Now, Sophie Thatcher, known for Showtime's thriller TV series called Yellow Jackets, which I truly love, and Chloe East, known for Steven Spielberg's film The Fabelmans, are great as Barnes and Paxton. While they seem to be naive at first, which I thought was a great way, both show strength and determination as the film continues, as both Barnes and Paxton proves that they're highly intelligent women, something that Mr. Reed underestimates. There are several times throughout the film we get some wonderful back and forth between the sisters and Mr. Reed, taking up on his challenge regarding religion and their faith. There was a good back and forth between Barnes and Mr. Reed during the second act of the film, which I thought was fantastic. She begins to see through his stories that he's telling them, and I thought Sophie Thatcher and Hugh Grant were great in that particular part in the film. Now, I think Chloe East shines the most, especially during the third act of the film when the motivations of Mr. Reed are revealed, which is quite something different than I expected because there's an earlier part of the film that he talks about, and we think that's the reason for his motivations, which kind of is a bit cliche because it's like kind of lackluster. But when that review is when we see that review in the third act of the film, it's like, wow, was not expecting that. It's quite different. So that gives, you got to get credit for Beck and Wilson coming up something a little different and not cliched. Now, again, I really did enjoy this film as we have some excellent acting with Grant, Thatcher, and East, some wonderful writing and direction between Beck and Woods. I thought they did a fantastic job with this film, just like they did with Haunt and just like they did with A Quiet Place. They are fantastic writers and directors. I mean, overall, it's a decent look in what drives people belief in their faith, whether you're a Muslim, Catholic, or a Jew. You know, I think the film really drives people's belief in their faith and the hard facts regarding religion in the past and the length of what some people do in the name of religion. I really thought they did a fantastic job in this particular film. So I have to give Heretic 4 out of my 5 bloody gold coins. Yes, I really did enjoy this film. Like I said before, great acting between all lead actors. Yeah, Topher Grace is in this film, but if you're not paying attention, you'll miss him because he's in the film barely about 5 minutes or so, and then that's it. Yeah, but he is in this film. Just had to say that about him. Like I said, great acting, great direction, great writing of this particular film. Everyone did a fantastic job. More likely, this could be on my top 10 best horror films of the year. So 4 out of my 5 bloody gold coins for Heretic. So there you have it, horror fans. That is my video and review of Heretic. Hope you did enjoy it. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up, like, and share. It really helps out with that YouTube algorithm. Have you seen the Heretic? What do you thought about it? Leave your comments in the comment section below and tell you what you thought about the film. Also, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. That way you'll be notified anytime when I put a new video such as this one. Once again, my name is Lamont Smith, better known as the Horror Miser Monty G, and always remember that horror rules. And I see you in my next video. Guys, stay safe out there.